before we start, we're putting out a spoiler warning now. If you have not seen the movie, don't listen to us until after the movie. So today, Steven and I are discussing the Secrets of Dumbledore.
Y'all, I was half right about the secret. A Dumbledore, namely Aberforth, fucked somebody. It wasn't a goat, but it was a girl, and that was the secret of Dumbledore.
Only one of the secrets, because there's an S, so therefore it's plural.
I really want to fixate on the one, though.
I know
the rest
you do.
of them.
You were fixating on the one before we saw it.
Look, it's canon. It's canon. I'm just saying. And I taught people last night at the movie that it was canon. That was probably my favorite part, was people just think I'm a madman for any number of reasons, mostly with merit. I'm not just shouting that Aberforth fucks goats because I think it's a funny sentence. It's in the books. Dumbledore said he did. We're getting off track. He fucked a goat, but he fucked a girl in this. Excited to be here. Excited to be here to discuss the many secrets of Dumbledore, plural. Dani, last night in the car, as we were driving home from the movie, I asked you just quick reaction, 1 out of 10. Where'd you rank it? And you said, I believe, a 6, was it? A 7?
No, I said a 7, and right now I am sticking with a strong 7. So as of this recording, we saw a pre-screening, so we have only seen this once. So our reactions may change once we process more and see it again. But right now I'm sticking with a strong 7. And I believe you were 7.5?
Yeah, and I feel good about that. I liked this movie a lot. I had a lot of people asking me what I thought about it when I posted that we saw it. And Warner Brothers, I didn't give any secrets away. I kept the Secrets of Dumbledore secret. I just gave them kind of spoiler-free reaction. I thought it was a good movie. I thought it balanced the lightness of what makes the Potter films writ large, the Wizarding World films, good, with the darker elements. I thought the color palette was really pretty and nice and crisp and clean. I thought they kind of restructured a couple different characters' personalities and choices in a really smart way from past films. I thought they kind of narrowed down the focus of the plot. Certainly in the second movie and somewhat in the first two, it's pretty wide ranging and it's pretty bold in terms of the number of characters they're trying to put service. With this one, they brought it down to a much more manageable kind of, plot focus. And then I thought, not for nothing, I thought Mads Mikkelsen and Jude Law were phenomenal together. So yeah, I liked this movie. I don't think it's cracking the AFI top 100 anytime soon, but I think it's up there in the upper half of Wizarding World movies, inclusive of both Potter and now Fantastic Beasts.
I would agree. They closed up some plot holes. It wasn't as chaotic as Crimes of Grindelwald was. And I really did enjoy it. And I'm looking forward to seeing it again.
It's the type of movie I think. So the movie, tell me if you agree or disagree, in some respects feels like a detective film of sorts, not purely in the way that the Batman did, where the Batman really was the detective film, but that the whole premise of what they're doing here is that one of the secrets of Dumbledore is that Dumbledore has this massive plot because Grindelwald can see the future because he is a seer of some way, shape, or form. So Dumbledore's whole theory is in order to get around Grindelwald's ability to see the future, you have to confuse him, and you have to confuse him by essentially doing the unexpected thing and creating confusion by doing many things at once. And so each character in this film is given a different charge. Some of the details we are provided, some of which we don't know ourselves. And this whole film progresses where characters are making choices and we have to kind of piece together intentionally, not because the writing was bad, I don't think. We have to intentionally piece together people's intentions and how actions tie together. And I really liked it. So I think on a rewatch, you're going to be able to maybe, whereas you fixated on Newt in this first going, because of course he is, one of the primary characters, maybe you'll focus a little bit heavier on Yusuf Kama's kind of storyline or Bunty and her thirsty storyline or whatever. I think on a rewatch, you're going to be able to dive deeper into some of the machinations of the semi-exposed plot lines for those characters.
Definitely. No, I definitely agree with that. And I'm excited to be able to do that. rather than just I feel like sometimes when the first time you see a movie, you watch it for the whole movie. And like you try to pick up on the little things, but you're still going to miss things because it's all new content that you're consuming. Because like even in a trailer, like you see little pieces, but it's not a whole thing. You get little glimpses of the trailer throughout it, so you don't really know what's coming.
Yeah, so we had a couple friends who saw an early cut of the film. It certainly, I don't believe, was a final cut. I think it sounds like it was a rough cut. And the sentiment they expressed to us, again, without trying to spoil anything for our benefit, was if you've seen the trailers, you've seen the film. And we talked about this on the drive home last night. I understand their point in that one of the things I thought was fascinating about the trailer was, unlike a lot of movie trailers, where typically those trailers tend to be super heavy and concentrated on one section of the film, the trailers that we got for Secrets of Dumbledore did encompass action from the first couple of minutes of the film all the way to like the last handful of scenes. I don't think you can watch the trailers and understand what happens in this movie, but it does in a different way than perhaps I have seen in modern film kind of preview encompass a lot of the film in terms of the territory it covers.
Do we want to start from the beginning, or are we just going to... Because we couldn't take notes. Our phones were not allowed to be on. There was a security guard. So we don't have a concise breakdown as we watch the movie as we have had during our rewatches.
Yeah. So perhaps to your point, Danny, perhaps for the sake of this, maybe we just kind of semi-chronologically go through and talk through what we remember from various points and what stood out, what we liked, what we didn't. Certainly, I am not foreign to tangents. If tangents arise as we progress, that is fine too. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Yeah, so I'll tee up the opening, and then you can feel free to get specific. The opening is a little fragmented, in my opinion. You kind of jump around from little vignettes of different character pairings, right? So you get Grindelwald doing his thing and his creepy castle thing, right? You get Newt out in the wild capturing Bambi, right? You get whatever Dumbledore's up. Like you get these different pairings, and for the first like half hour or so, the action kind of just bops along, going from different scene to different scene, and they don't necessarily tie together cleanly. And it's meant, I think, to, I guess, catch people up as to what's happening in the plot, but also I think just to kind of reset where each of the characters is and move forward. And it does feel disjointed, but I promise you it gets a lot more cohesive and concise and clean from there.
Yeah, it's definitely like a throwback. It's like here they are now. Here's some new characters. Let's get you all caught up, and then let's go into the story. And like, yeah, it's disjointed, but I think it worked for what they were doing.
No, it worked particularly as the rest of the movie unfolded. For the first half hour or so, I was getting a little nervous. I was like, oh no, is this just going to be kind of like, because one of the complaints I think we had, minus all the canonical complaints from Crimes of Grindelwald, is that it very much felt like two separate stories of there's Newt and all of his creatures, and then there's the actual story of what's Dumbledore doing with Grindelwald. Yes. Right. And so the opening scene, right, unless I'm forgetting something from 24 hours ago, which is possible, is Newt tracking down this Chillin. Is that correct?
No, it started on Dumbledore.
What did it start on Dumbledore?
It was because it was a very like slow burn. I'm trying to remember it, but I know it started on Dumbledore. Then it went to Newt.
Sure. That only emphasizes my point perhaps a little bit more.
I was just surprised because I remember thinking, because like when Newt came in, he was kind of like running through the forest. But when it started, I remembered it was like kind of more like slow and subtle into it. And I was just kind of like, oh, it felt you weren't thrown right into it.
Yeah, it's funny. I'll just we're not going to bury the lead here. The whole premise of this movie is that a magical deer can look into a human soul and determine if they're good or if they're bad. And so the whole movie rests on the premise of there being not one Chillin, which is the name of the creature that is Bambi, but two, And Grindelwald has one, and Dumbledore has one, and Grindelwald tries to enchant. Like, it's funny, as we were driving home, I was like, this whole movie just rested on the premise of a deer tells people if they're good or bad. Like, we just went through 2 hours, 23 minutes to see a deer bow in front of a human.
Yeah.
So
I think the first was the tea scene, the first scene with Dumbledore. Where
the tea scene.
It's the tea scene, because I really like the scene. I think that was first.
That was great. Okay, yeah. So let's start there. Okay. Look, listeners, if this tells you nothing else, it's that A, to Denny's point, we weren't able to take notes, but B, we're not overly produced, heavily high production value here. We're giving you our honest thoughts based on our recollection as we went through them. This is going to be an imperfect, although I am pretty perfect, recount of what we watched on screen last night. Oh my God, the tea scene. So many things. The way that, look. So let's just start with the big one, which is Mads Mikkelsen. A lot of people, as we've talked about on this podcast before, right? Johnny Depp versus Mads Mikkelsen. All I'm going to say, not commenting on the quality of either's performance, although I think both were excellent, is Johnny Depp is your quintessential sci-fi fantasy villain, right? He's got this fantastical look, right? That doesn't look of a reality that we're familiar with, right? He really feels like he's not of this world. Mads Mikkelsen, straight out of central casting for like a Nazi villain. Look, he played Le Chiffre in Bond, and he did that flawlessly. This was that, but without the bloody tears. He is cold. He rocks a suit with just immense amounts of precision and like not repressed anger, but like very buttoned up, kind of cold, like driving anger. And I thought he was just remarkable.
And I agree with that. So I was thinking about when I was watching the scene, and I wasn't trying to compare, but I was trying to think of like Depp's Grindelwald in that scene. And the thing about his is it's very chaotic energy to the point where I'm like, okay, so Grindelwald essentially almost took over the whole wizarding world. Depp's version of it, in my head, I'm like, I understand why Death Eaters would follow this guy, but I couldn't see like the average person following this guy. Whereas with Mads, I feel like he had not necessarily charisma, but a charisma that people were willing to follow and follow to the point of wanting him to lead.
Well, we're going to go there. He fits the bill of so many Third Reich leaders, right? And this movie, not for nothing, takes place in the late 30s in Germany mostly, right? Like his source material for this is pretty straightforward, right? The charisma of a Hermann Goering with the ruthless, maniacal, fanatical leadership of a Hitler. And like he nails it. Yeah, so I think if Johnny Depp is still in this film, the opening scene can't happen the way it does because there's no way Frosted Tips, boy band Johnny Depp is walking into a Muggle tea room and sitting down having a casual conversation. That's what I love about this scene. What?
They weren't in the actual Muggle world.
Yes, they were. He said you smell them around you, Muggles. Yes, they were.
I see.
No, ma'am, because Grindelwald says, can't you smell them, Muggles? You have to admit they make a good cup of tea.
Yeah, but like I took it as it was like a link they had that they weren't actually there in person with each other.
No, because Dumbledore is doing the tea himself with his own. It's not magic. They're in the Muggle world, and that's what makes that scene so remarkable to me. Because if they're in the Wizarding world, everyone's going to be mobbing them.
I didn't know. I didn't think they were in the Wizarding world. I thought it was like in a mental type of.
Oh, you thought the whole thing was mental.
I didn't think they were physically in the same space. Because like you see Dumbledore in the tea, and there's like a letter or something, like almost like a calling. And in my head, it was a meeting point that they had set up previously in their relationship for them to communicate with each other without being in physical presence.
See, so that raises a really good point. And so my interpretation of that was he was recounting something that had happened in the near past. To me, it was a memory, but that makes a lot of sense. That also raises the whole point of they kind of sort of introduced this whole very ACOTAR-esque like other universe that exists within the mental connections between people's minds. And like that's something that happens throughout the films, and it's a little hard to follow because it's not it's not just like Harry and Dumbledore at King's Cross where there's no one else around. It's like there's this whole world that is there, and like it's hard to tell like what's sentient versus what's imagined.
Yeah, well, and that ends with you see Dumbledore not in the tea room, but holding the blood pact, which is why I thought that it was like a mental meetup place and not a physical location for them.
Oh, I might give that one to you.
So, and this is stuff like when we rewatch, we'll start like really like, and we might do like a 20-30 minute follow up after we get more rewatches in.
Well, now we better have stuff to say for that one.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, I'm with you on that.
So then it goes from there to Newt on the raft.
But look, so before we get to Newt on the raft, the thing I want to say just about Grindelwald and Dumbledore and Mads Mikkelsen and Jude Law throughout this film is I walked away from this film still having no idea how Grindelwald felt/feels about Dumbledore. There's been a lot of conjecture and just people kind of, conversing over the past handful of years of, well, was Grindelwald always just leading on Dumbledore as a child? Walking out of this film, I still have no idea what the truth is. And I like that because I think it's very easy to telegraph, well, I always loved you and now I don't, or I never loved you. And that's just like, it cheapens it. Yeah. I love that Mads Mikkelsen was able to provide this nuanced performance. That the same way we talk about the twinkle in Jude Law, Dumbledore's eye, Mads Mikkelsen, despite being cold and just absolutely terror-inducing, is able to give this smirk and a little bit of, not a twinkle, but a little bit of energy in his eyes that it's hard to truly understand where the truth lies kind of at his core. And I love that. I thought that was really well done.
And when it like comes up, he puts it like back on Dumbledore. So you never know what his intentions and his feelings were behind it. He references Dumbledore's feelings more than his own.
That raises such a great point, Danny. I'm glad you brought that up. In that tea scene that may or may not be imagined, Grindelwald says something along the lines of, you were loyal to me, you were committed to me. Johnny Depp's Grindelwald gives off total bottom vibes. Mads Mikkelsen is a top through and through. Let me tell you. Very different aesthetics and vibes that the two of them were giving off. And boy, oh boy, I think the fanfic crowd is going to have a ball with it because it was a whole different Grindelwald. Anywho, I thought about that last night. Carry on.
So then that scene switches to Newt. And you see him on this raft, like itty bitty raft, just like floating down this random body of water.
Well, it's funny because when that scene first kind of comes, pans up from the water, I'm like, are we about to get Hogwarts? Because it looks like, because
if you see the light first, and they look like the lights that were on the boats going into Hogwarts.
Yeah, you see both of the lights. You see the light from the little boat, and it looks like the first year's boat. Yes. I'm like, oh my God, are we about to get Hogwarts? And then spoiler alert, they do that like an hour later. And it was still really cool. And they did. And I was like, oh my God. And then you get this really cool pan up on Newt. I don't know how to explain it. Everything about Newt in this film seemed more confident. First two films, don't get me wrong, Newt's doing a lot of cool stuff, but in the way he moved, he seemed very timid. And I think that was great. I'm not criticizing it. I like it. His character in this film, the physical movements seem to be with a lot more confidence and on the front foot rather than kind of a little bit of that timidity that we saw. It's
almost like, not like the actor getting more comfortable in his role, but like Newt becoming comfortable in the role and the storyline he has been set to live.
Exactly. Yeah. The whole chillin' thing. First off, what kind of name is that for a creature? It's like, hey, I'm chilling. No, you're a glow in the dark deer. I didn't fully get that one. Look, as we've discussed before, I don't come to these films for the Fantastic Beasts. The chillin' thing at first is slightly confusing insofar as Newt, through his own powers of tracking creatures, we assume, finds this big chillin, who then produces little chillin. And then out of nowhere, long hair Ezra Miller appears with a couple other bad people. I think Vindo was one of them, right? Bellatrix 1.0 shows up, and somehow they're there as well. No one ever explains how they find Little Chillin' and Big Chillin'. And a battle ensues, and Newt's case has like 8 legs and it can run, which was a new development. I will say one of the things I thought, and I don't know how intentional this was on the movie maker's part, but there were a lot of scenes in this that reminisced scenes from the Potter films, right? So I was getting strong Deathly Hallows running through the forest away from the Snatchers vibes as Newt was going through this. There's a couple scenes later that we'll hopefully get to, assuming we remember, that like felt very much like, if not direct callbacks, at least inspired buys.
Yeah, I have a few of them listed down. I was researching, there was no Chillin' listed in the Fantastic Beasts book, the physical book. So I was curious. It was, so then
we go to scary Nazi castle, right? Right, don't they?
It's that or Jacob.
Sure, it's either that or Jacob. Let's just follow the Chillin' story. They go back to scary Nazi castle. Grindelwald has some weird lines that he gives to Credence. Queenie is looking very different physically than how Queenie looked in the past couple of movies. And Grindelwald, using his wand, which I guess he conducted nonverbal magic, slits the throat of Lil Chillin, who did like a little Bambi-esque fall on the ice. Like it looked like if you took the Bambi photo stills, like the frames from Disney, and you just pasted them in, like literally plops down, legs kind of fall. Anyhow, Jacob.
Yes. Jacob, and we meet Lolly Hicks.
Yeah,
I loved her.
The accent took me a little while to kind of get into because it felt way too much like me as like someone who was trying to put on an accent, but her performance was great. In on the performance. The accent took me a couple minutes.
Yeah. No, I like the character. I like the connection.
Yeah, fun fact, I met Jessica Williams before.
Oh.
She came and spoke at American where I went to college, and I was part of the student government executive team that brought her in. And she talked during her, like, she did like a Q&A lecture thing. I don't really remember, if I'm being honest, but she talked. I remember her talking about like, I'd love to be in a Harry Potter film one day. Swear to God, this happened. It was American University, like fall of 2015. And here she is in one. It was, I know she was in the past one in the book, but like kind of remarkable. Like she whiteboarded that and manifested it. It was pretty damn cool. Yeah, I thought she was great. The whole setup for Jacob I thought was outstanding. Jacob, let me say, Dan Fogler, again, just does a yeoman's work in this movie. Just
great lines.
Like physical comedy, actual kind of verbal comedy and intonation. Just perfect, like spot on. Like nothing I would change at any point in the movie.
Agreed. No, I really liked him. And they even did like some Fantastic Beasts music callbacks during some of his stuff. So that was fun to see, hear, whatever. From here, I have nothing in order. I was just writing things that jumped out at me.
Yeah, again, listeners, if you want a perfect recap, I don't know who you're going to go to, but it ain't going to be us. So you've been warned, thief, beware, enter, whatever the Grand Guts thing is. Come on, you're with us. This is we're in like episode 100 something at this point. You know the drill.
So from the bakery, they pop onto a train where Newt and company are, and Jacob sells a frying pan in his hand. And I just kept thinking of a Rapunzel Jacob cosplay crossover because he just like randomly kept carrying this frying pan.
Yeah, it felt very much like, they said to Kenneth Branagh, like, hey, can we borrow the Murder on the Orient Express set? Can we like just use that for like a day or two? Like, you're a Potter guy, like we're Potter guys. Like, can we do that? I still don't entirely get. I don't get why they had to take a train. I don't it doesn't make sense when you think about it for like half a second.
The only thing I could think the train making sense was a meetup for everyone because they were all departing from each other. Kind of showing a.
Yeah, but could they not have just met up in an empty warehouse somewhere, had a little talk, and then apparated? Like, they could do magic.
Yeah, no, I know.
It was a really cool scene. I'm in on it. But it's like, well, wait a minute. They don't need to be on a train. So this is where we start to get the beginnings of Dumbledore's game here. It's basically a game, right?
It is. It's a game, and it's a long game.
Right? Like, what's her face? Bunty gets a letter only she's allowed to read. Theseus gets a tie. Yusuf Kama doesn't even get told instructions. He just goes,
he said he already knows what he's supposed to do.
Right. Like Jacob gets a wand that's not really a wand. It's never fully explained. Like it's missing.
Didn't he say when he handed it that there's no core?
Well, sure. It's missing a core. So basically it's a prop is my understanding. Yeah. There's no actual power because we see Jessica Williams, we see Eulalie Hicks kind of make him do magic, kind of sort of the impression that he's doing magic. And so it's never wholly explained. Like it's there, right? You kind of have to put two and two together on that one. But again, that was one of the things I was really happy with in the trailers is, again, the same way it would have been really easy to say, Grindelwald, I never loved you to Dumbledore, or I always loved, right? It also would have been really easy to make the big plot reveal that Jacob gets a wand. And like they didn't hide that at all. That was in the trailer from like day one. It wasn't a thing that was like subterfuge. I liked that.
I like that. And I like that they didn't like find a way to be like, oh, Jacob's actually magic. Because people kept talking. I was like doing rumors. They're like, well, his name. And I was like, no, that's too far. And then Bunty leaves with Newt's case.
Yeah, that's a big one. I have a question. Mm-hmm. So we, to this day, don't necessarily know for whatever reason, as benign or malevolent as your brain wants to go to, why Catherine Waterston wasn't more heavily involved in this movie. Do you think that Bunty's prominence is as simple as they needed another character because Tina, for whatever reason, was not playing a major role in this movie and Bunty was already introduced? So like, hey, let's just elevate her.
So we talked about this a little with Sarah when we did our thoughts on what we were kind of expecting and hoping for.
We talked about this?
Very lightly about her, if her prominence and we talked about it more in the sense of, is Bunty a bigger character because everybody loved her from movie 2? Because she really got like this trending, all love for Bunty. With the Tina thing, I actually think that Lolly Hicks was replacing the Tina character over Bunty's character.
You think
because of how much she was in it and with the core group, whereas Bunty was in it, but she was kind of like, she was essentially like the spy of the group. You saw her, you saw peeks of her, but she wasn't ever with the full group.
Yeah, so, well, I don't think maybe the answer isn't necessarily just 1-to-1, right? Maybe
no, I don't think it is either.
I think it was probably spread across a couple. But just, I mean, and look, this is no offense, and whoever I don't know the actress who led Bunty's name. No offense intended. I do not know any of her other work. I do not believe. Whereas again, maybe I have a bit of exposure bias, but like Jessica Williams is a known quantity to me. Mm-hmm. So to me, it feels slightly odd that in this major tentpole movie, all of a sudden Bunty is getting like not a major role, but she's bumped up a couple rungs to like, core minor character.
And part of me is that they did introduce a lot of new characters in this. So do they want to introduce another new character?
Well, they introduced a lot of new characters, but they didn't do a lot of names. Right.
No,
so like
they
all of those brown shirts that kind of carried out a lot of Grindelwald stuff didn't get names.
Yeah.
Right. Like Air Vogel, Richtenberg kind of in this allegory, he got a name, and Santos and the other one, but that was it. So
actress is Victoria Yeats. She's not in a lot. She's predominantly on Call the Midwife, but she does not have a large filmography.
Yeah, and that's what I think she did great. This is not meant as disrespect.
Yeah, no, this is nothing against her acting or anything. I'm still curious if the choice was not necessarily because of the fans' love for her, but there was more of a demand. Like when her wand came out, a lot of the community was like, "Oh, have to get Bunty's wand."
Yeah. Anywho, something I found curious. Yeah. So we get 1930s Germany, and it's not nearly as explicit. Like there's not freaking swastikas flying on roofs, mind you, but the brutalist architecture is there. You get the propaganda signs and banners everywhere.
Riots happening.
Air Vogel is terrifying. Yeah. And every single one of the henchmen looks like you could put them in a brown suit with a red armband and they'd be in character like pretty damn easily.
The entrance into the wizarding part of it felt a lot more natural than we talked a lot how the one in France felt really weird and awkward placement.
Yeah, that was odd.
So it was funny watching Jacob go through the wall because apparently the bricks don't completely part. They just kind of smash you as you walk through the wall. So
we get an answer to the question. I know we're skipping ahead here by talking about Jacob interacting with magic. We get an answer to can Jacob see Hogwarts, which is a resounding yes.
Yeah.
Right. So we talked, I do remember we talked about this last time. I remember some things, right, is based on the end of Crimes of Grindelwald where the whole crew is on the Hogwarts bridge. Jacob's looking around pretty, befuzzled and mesmerized. You can interpret that one of two ways. Was this a man looking at a castle saying, holy shit? Was this a man looking at a bunch of runes saying, why are we all standing here? We see him in Hogwarts engaging with students in the halls. Like
he is brought into the magic.
Asked and answered, which was, if you're looking for those kind of little mini pieces of trivia, pretty cool thing. What do you have next on your notes?
Well, then we go into the manticores, the newt dance.
Y'all, I told you. I don't care how many more of these movies we're going to get, if it's 1, if it's 2, if it's 13. For every one of these movies, the production team sits there in a conference room somewhere and says, what cute dance move, viral thing can we do with Newt and a creature?
And Anya was doing it in the theater before we even left.
Yep. And then Karina and others were doing it in the hallway afterwards. Look, it got the biggest kind of laugh kind of reaction out of our crowd, I think.
It was also a chaotic scene because we talked about it is that like as they're trying to escape, you could not keep track of what was going on. Like walls were popping.
Yeah. So the exit didn't make sense because the massive manticore, whatever the hell that thing was just kind of thrashing at will like the Kraken in Pirates of the Caribbean. See, it's not a Creating Magic episode if I don't bring up pirates somehow. But before that, here's my question. Dumbledore's like, you're going to need this and this and this to get in. And like, it's clearly some sort of pass, ticket, whatever. So Dumbledore knows, he understands enough about this prison subway death trap thing. Does he not know that like it's like it's a Hotel California thing? Because the second Newt gets there, the guard is like, you ain't getting out of here. Like you can go in, but you ain't getting out. And like at that point, if I'm Newt, I'm like, well, wait, what'd you say? Didn't I just give you like my pass? Like visitor's rights? Like I didn't understand that at all. Like at all. Like Dumbledore should have said something.
Him wearing the tie that he gave to Theseus.
Well, right. But Dumbledore, who clearly knows enough about this pseudo prison thing, should have been like
that was supposedly shut down, but is like this underground like wizarding.
But Dumbledore should have just said, "Hey, you're gonna need this paperwork to get in, just so you know, it's not going to be a clean escape."
Yeah.
Right. Or hey, just you're gonna have to escape, not like you can walk in, walk out. Yeah. Anywho. Seeing as we're talking about prisons, this is kind of jumping back in time a little bit. But there was a scene earlier where Queenie goes to Credence's room and has this little mini scene with him. Astute watchers of this movie, such as I, will notice that there's one shot of Credence with like a wall of his room in the background, and at like hip length, maybe somewhere between the hip and the knee, you can see in chalk on the walls the word Azkaban written out. There's a couple other words that precede it. It wasn't prisoner of. I couldn't decipher what it was, but I'm pretty confident it wasn't that. Definitely says Azkaban. If you also are a keen-eyed, watcher like myself, Let us know at Creating Magic Podcast what that said, because I'm curious. Anyhow, we're done with prisons now, right?
Yeah, we're done with prisons.
Okay.
And then we end up back at Hogwarts, right? Well, we've also skipped the Aberforth Dumbledore.
Oh, Aberforth!
And a lot of Aberforth Dumbledore conversations in the Hog's Head.
So I loved those scenes for a couple of reasons. A, the actor who plays Aberforth just kills it. Absolutely kills it. I thought he did a great job. Two, it's a scene where, let's say somehow you've stumbled into this theater and you've never...
Richard Coyle.
Yeah, Richard Coyle, whose name I've heard before. I've heard him. He's in something I've watched.
He has a wide range of movies.
I'm gonna determine this.
Yeah, no, and it's a very wide variety, so I wouldn't even guess which one you have seen.
Well, let's see. Filmography. Nothing on this is sticking out to me. I've seen his name not just with this movie before. Interesting. Okay. Anywho, doesn't matter. I thought Richard Coyle was phenomenal as Aberforth. And what I like about the scene is two different things. If somehow you stumbled into this movie theater and have never read or watched Harry Potter before, you can just watch the scene and understand that it's two brothers who have very different tracks in life and don't really relate too well. But if you have all the added context, seeing Albus try to sit there and make very docile, domestic conversation that reflects on a very trying time for all of them is a deeply fascinating choice. And I thought it was just beautifully acted by both of them.
And I think having it in the Hog's Head, the setting, added to that, we're okay, this is, yeah. But
yeah, I thought that was all very good. Is this also, this is also when we get Minerva showing up?
Yeah. So,
you just
they had that first scene, and then they go to Hogwarts, and then they have dinner at Hog's Head,
Minerva shows up when it's just
no, you're right. Yeah.
You just got to make your peace with Minerva being an adult when she should be 10, right? You just got to make your peace with it, y'all.
Yeah.
We already fought that fight and lost it after the last movie. The actress is good. She does the brogue well. She she does the thing. But the thing just shouldn't. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. So the group. So what happens next is they all escape from their various places. Right. That's what happens next. There we go. Is you get Bunty doing the case replication thing, where Bunty could have been a little more prepared for that.
Yeah.
Right. Again, if you know that you're going into a place where they don't speak the same language as you, and you don't want them opening first of all,
there's a Muggle-worthy.
Yeah.
I was sitting there going, don't they have the Muggle-worthy version? We saw it in movie 1. Why aren't we using it in movie 3?
Yeah, that was confusing. But if you know you don't want this chubby German leather maker opening your case, say, hey, I just need you to replicate this. Just look at it and do your best. Don't hand it over to them. Don't not specify if I can double negative there. I get it was for comedic dramatic effect, but that's on you, girl.
Yeah.
So anywho, everyone escapes in their various situations and they end up back at Hogwarts at the Hog's Head. Then they go into the castle from there, right?
They started at Hogwarts because Jacob's having his little wand scene, and then they're dinner's at the Hog's Head, and then they go back to Hogwarts.
I'll tell you what, and tell me how you feel about this. My theory as to why that whole scene happened in the Great Hall and not Dumbledore's office is the Great Hall is basically already set at Leavesden pretty well, and Dumbledore's office, they would have had to do some maneuvering of other sets and retrofitting trinkets.
It's also a hard set to film in.
Yeah, correct. So it feels like they were hey, the Great Hall's open. It's pretty already done. We just have to bring the lighting back in and change a couple of the banners and we're good to go.
Yeah. I enjoyed that the Slytherins gave Jacob cockroach clusters.
Yeah, great. Again, we talk a lot about just wanting to see the regularness of Wizarding World culture every day. When you talk about the other types of content we'd like to see, seeing Slytherin boys be shitheads to a full-grown adult, love it. Here for it. Right? Seeing little girls fawn over this theoretically murdering, assassinating Jacob and try to get his wand. Right. Love it. That's great stuff. I'm here for all these little personality vignettes that you get for each of not for each of the houses, but in this case, the two.
Then it goes to the Hogshead, and they discuss what the importance of the Chillin is.
Correct.
And then we're back at Hogwarts in the room that is required.
No, because before we get back to that, my favorite scene from the whole movie. This is genuine. No, you're about to laugh. My favorite scene is not. I love Aberforth and Dumbledore and Albus discussing Credence being Aberforth's son. Big plot reveal. Everyone in the theater gasped. Mm-hmm. That was good. But my favorite scene is the next one between Newt and Albus in that same room. It is this movie. So what I loved about this movie, perhaps more than any other things I said I liked about it, is that it has a through line of lightness and comedic intent that is interspersed with the seriousness and the weight of the world and the situation they're in. I think Crimes of Grindelwald struggled because, for many reasons, let's be clear, but it was a very dark movie with failed attempts at punctuating humor every so often. This movie was a lot more genial from start to finish, and I loved that. And then you get this scene, which is anything but. And it's not played as dark. It's played as extremely emotionally vulnerable and intense. And that's not something that you get typically from Newt, even though he is vulnerable. He's very vulnerable at like a surface level because he seems to be, at least in the past movies, very afraid of opening himself up because he knows what happens when you get hurt. And then Albus, who, of course, is just Mr. Smoke and Mirrors when it comes to his genuine emotions. And you get this really... It almost, as the scene started, in my head, I was sitting there like, is this word for word the passage when Albus in the books is describing the fight with Grindelwald and Ariana and Aberforth? And then it's not, but it's so, it was so intense. And like, I was on the edge of my seat watching that because that's what the movie's about. Right, the movie's not about the plot of the movie rests on the glow in the dark deer, the chillin', but right, the movie is about Dumbledore's internal struggle with the choices he made as a youth and how he reconciles those with the man he believes he's become, or at least is trying to be, and how other forces, both ones from his past/present Grindelwald, or ones from his present/future students and former students, perceive him and are exerting their own assumptions and life choices on him. So this scene was beautiful. I thought it was so beautiful. And that's one that's so easy to screw up because, again, you can be too heavy-handed or too whatever. But, I mean, Eddie Redmayne and Jude Law handled it just absolutely perfect.
They did. And then because they had that moment after this whole story where you can tell like Newt's trying to figure out what to say and he starts thinking, Dumbledore stops him and goes, "Don't disappoint me, Newt. Like, the thing that is good about you is that you are always truthful," type of situation. And it was just like also another moment of like him being like, you don't have to like try to comfort me in this situation. Like, you don't have to say words.
Yeah, I thought that was, we're spoiling our end of movie favorites right now, but I thought that was the most beautiful scene in the entire film. I thought that was great. So yeah, to your point, and this is where I'm going to do a canonical Minerva McGonagall 2.0 here. All right. So if Minerva's presence in Crimes of Grindelwald was our first complaint, because that's a big one from that movie, my big canonical complaint in this movie is that in Chamber of Secrets, original Harry Potter, not Chamber of Secrets, good Lord, I was thinking Chamber Pots, in Goblet of Fire, we hear Dumbledore talking to Karkaroff or Barty Crouch or someone about, I think it was Karkaroff, wasn't it? About the chamber pots and how one time he discovered, walking along this hallway, chamber pots that he had never known to exist before, and he's never been able to find them again. Right? Then you fast forward to the end of the books when in Deathly Hallows, like Harry comes to the conclusion that he and Voldemort, that Voldemort thinks that Voldemort was the only one to ever really discover the room requirement, which we know is false because the room of many things. Anywho, but we never get like verbal, literal confirmation that Dumbledore didn't know about the room of requirement, but it's very strongly implied throughout the books that Dumbledore was not aware of the actual room of requirement. He had encountered it in its form sometime, but never put two and two together there. However, in this movie, we get Jude Law Dumbledore walking around the room of requirement, or as Newt says, the room that we require, with that weird spinning portkey thing. And that again doesn't add up. The casual viewer is not going to know or care. The obsessive is going to take issue with it.
And it's not something that necessarily had to be in the room of requirement.
Again, it's a weird. This one I don't know how to explain as cleanly as the Great Hall versus Dumbledore's office.
Yeah,
but yeah, it doesn't make any sense why it's there.
It could have easily happened in any other space.
In a classroom, in his office. Yeah. If you're already setting things in the Great Hall, just kick the students out and put it in the Great Hall.
Yeah.
Anywho. I thought that was fascinating. I would like to point out that Voldemort, Tom Riddle, was born in 1926. Hagrid was 2 years older than Tom Riddle?
About.
So this movie takes place in the late 30s. Theoretically, we could have / should have seen Tom Riddle and or it depending on when, we should have seen them moving around the castle in the late 30s, no?
Yeah, they didn't. That was one thing that I had thought. I'm like, did I miss them throwing up a timestamp and they didn't anywhere in this?
No, they didn't throw up a timestamp. I think I saw I forget where I read this or heard this, but I think the math checks out to where Hagrid was expelled around like 42 or 43 or something like that. So
it would have had to be late 30s then because he was in his third year.
Yeah, so maybe expelled. Hagrid's not there. So maybe they're not there yet in this movie. Fair enough. But depending on exactly when this movie is set, which at least in the movie we're not told, maybe in the screenplay or something it says it. But we could have seen them, which would have been a fascinating thing. Yeah, so they take the port keys and they do the whole shell game with the various cases. And they zoom off to Bhutan because let's go to Bhutan. Why not? I felt like a very bizarre choice, did it not?
It felt bizarre, but I kind of still enjoyed it.
There has to be. Look, say what you will about this creator and all of her choices in the past 20 years. A lot of the original Potter books, the historical context for the whether it's, the Centaurs have a very dark historical context, but a lot of the historical context seems to be very well researched and thought out in terms of why things come from the places they do or the derivations of words and things like that. So maybe Bhutan in literature or in mythology has some form of magical.
Even one of them said that Jacob, after it came up that's where it was going, was that some people believe that magic was founded here. Essentially, it was something along those lines.
You're right, but in universe, sure. But what I'm saying is
out of universe, there's probably something
about the whatever geography. Right? There's got to be something.
We'll refer to Sarah at some point to answer that question.
Good call. Sarah, if you're listening to this, creatingmagicpodcast@gmail.com, at Creating Magic Podcast. Let us know what you think. I thought it was really... Here's what this is again me. So this movie was originally supposed to be set in Brazil. And then during the rewrite, it kind of got shifted. It did get shifted. You still get this either Portuguese or Brazilian candidate in Santos who's running for Confederation president. It felt to me with all of the flags going and all of the chanting in this Bhutanese village, it felt almost like a carnival. And so I'm like, did they just repurpose shots or repurpose image, vision and direction? Because it felt very Carnival-esque. Maybe
it felt very that way, and the decisions behind switching it, not sure if it was COVID influenced and abilities to film in certain places because of restrictions and outbreaks. So not sure if that was also a part of the influence there. But no, it felt very much like a festival of sorts.
And look, let's be clear. I don't know the first thing about Bhutan and what their day-to-day village culture looks like. So maybe this is spot on. But it did feel oddly reminiscent of what I have seen in pop culture and in just my knowledge of the world.
It was definitely Wizarding World.
Yes.
This was not a Muggle area.
Yeah. So they do this whole thing where they go on a wild goose chase through
a lot of little throwbacks with the cases.
Yes. The cases with the enchanted bludgers attacking people.
Monster Book of Monsters.
the snitch having a dual purpose, the monster book of monsters, all these little things. It's like, hey, I recognize that.
The duplication, like Helga's Cup, the bakery ones.
Yep. Yeah, that was good. It was fascinating. Which again raises the point, if Dumbledore knows how to enchant a bludger, when the enchanted bludger 40, 50 years later was attacking young Harry, how come he wasn't like, hey, that looks like the bludger I enchanted in Bhutan 50 years ago? I thought those scenes were good. Like, I thought they balanced funny with the seriousness and the impending tension and kind of fear that you get turning around every corner. Like, it certainly wasn't horror-esque like Game of Thrones, The Battle of Winterfell, but you felt increased tension every time a character would turn a corner and all these nameless brown shirt Nazi wizards are chasing after them.
And you weren't ever quite positive who had.
No, again, I love that.
Because they did this thing where Jacob went to pick up a case and Dumbledore said, not that one, which is the case Newt takes. So you're assuming Newt has the creatures. But at the same time, you're like, no, it's too obvious. Newt can't have the actual creatures.
So I'm gonna see. This is where I'm gonna give myself credit, but really some credit here goes to Simply Potter Girl, Brandy J. Brown. There was only 5 cases on the ground there, but we knew that there were 6 cases in total, right? Because there's the original plus the 5 copies. So when there's only 5 cases in the Portkey room requirement, we know there's an extra case somewhere.
Well,
right? No, because Bunty brings in her 1 case original and says, I need 5 copies of this made. So then there's 6 cases. I feel like I'm doing either an LSAT thing or a math word problem right now. So then there's 6 cases. When we go to the room of requirement, there's only 5 cases sitting on the ground. Mm-hmm. Right. So when Dumbledore does that, don't touch that one, go to the other one, I think he's just having fun. I think that's just Dumbledore because, again, everyone knows that Dumbledore holds all the cards here. I think that's just him being like, I'm going to fuck with these guys.
Oh, see, I took it as Dumbledore wanted Newt to think he had the actual case.
No, I agree, but I think he did it out of, I'm going to have a little bit of fun here, right? Because if everyone knows their case is fake, like the stakes aren't going to be super high, right? Like I interpreted that scene as like Dumbledore's
case never showed up.
Yes, it did.
No, Bunty had a case in her hand. She picked up a case. Newt had a case. Theseus had a case. Lolly had a case. And Jacob had a case. That's 5 cases.
But the 6th case showed up because Bunty shows up in the whole veil thing, which I thought was going to be Tina.
Case when she left.
Thought that was going to be but I think she drops that one to cause the commotion.
We never saw her drop a case.
No, because otherwise, why would you make a 6th case? Why would you have 6? There's no reason. If you're only going to have 5 at the Bhutanese village, why wouldn't you only make 4 copies then? And the 5th is the original, and then you're good. Because then there's 4 fakes and 1 real. Again, I think Dumbledore. Again, it wasn't explained, and I don't necessarily need it to be. I think that Dumbledore and or Bunty or Aberforth or someone brought the real case there and had it ready because Dumbledore's like, I got to go. Other people need me now when he left Jacob. Right. I think all 5 cases in the room requirement are all diversionary ones that explode with books or papers or bludgers or snitches or baked goods or whatever the hell. Right. And the real one is the one that Bunty has when, again, I thought that was going to be Tina in the green veil coming up the steps because the way Newt looks at her, I'm like, oh, we're finally going to get her. He wasn't looking at her feet. That's how we should have known it wasn't her because Newt would have looked at her feet and been like, oh, I'm a little uncomfortably hot under the collar here. I like this. But that's the real one.
See, I went with Bunty had the case the whole time.
I don't think Dumbledore is too smart to, and again, not a shot at Bunty, to during this whole massive, maze chase through the Bhutanese village to have the real case in play. I think he's got the real case ready at the last moment for Bunty to then grab. Because what happens if Bunty has the real one, but Bunty gets caught during the maze chase? Oh, well, then you're fucked. The whole plan's over. So, no, Brandy pointed this out in the movie. She elbowed me and held up 6. She was like 6, 5. And go back, loyal listeners, go back and watch that scene.
Disagree.
Okay, we'll agree to disagree, but we'll agree that I'm also right. It's fine. It's fine.
You're not.
Okay. So yeah, and then this is where you lose me a little bit. So fake chillin', fake Lil Chillin', like undead Lil Chillin'. Yeah, guys, there's this whole scene where Grindelwald is in a wool suit in a pool, resurrecting a dead Lil Chillin'. It happened. Vogel, the Nazi, and Ezra Miller, the recently arrested movie star, and the other, and Vinda are all there. That happened. So the resurrected Lil Chillin' does its thing and bows to Grindelwald. And then this is where Bunty shows up. Well, first Jacob shows up and gets tortured. Newt tries to stop, doesn't really. I think they're about to kill Jacob. Which would have, that would have been a Game of Thrones type of conviction. Like, hey, no, like, this is serious shit here, y'all. Like, this is the premise of World War II. Like, people are going to die. I'm not saying I would have liked Jacob dying because I think he's probably the best character in the films, but that would have made for a damn good plot twist. Anywho, Bunty shows up with the case, the real case, not the diversionary case, and real Lil Chillin' comes out. And this is where it beggars belief. Because at this point, Grindelwald knows the jig is up. Right? Because the real Lil Chillin' is going to not bow to him. Why doesn't Grindelwald just kill little baby Chillin' and then seize power at this point? He knows that he's at the end of his rope here with this whole ruse. I don't understand why the murderous megalomaniac evil leader doesn't start exhibiting murderous megalomaniac tendencies and murder the Lil Chillin' and then just use brute force to seize power. Don't get it.
No idea. But in this time, they then break the blood pact.
Yeah, the blood pact gets broken through this weird threesome of spells. Don't fully understand how exactly it got broken. They explain it, but I still didn't.
Paula and I essentially broke it down to love conquers all.
Yeah, I still.
That's kind of. Dumbledore... But then part of me is also like, Grindelwald couldn't move against Albus, but does it link up to other Dumbledores? Because he then moved against.
No, because No, I can't.
Well, I was trying to figure it out in my head. So I was like going with that, and I was like, no, but he also tried to use it against 3 Dumbledores at once.
Yeah, I didn't understand. I didn't understand how it got broken, but it got broken. That's all that matters. And then they go into that weird metaverse where he's like, "Who do you have now, Dumbledore? Who will love you now?" Whatever. Okay. Grindelwald does a weird Glinda the Good floating bubble to kind of flee, which was bizarre. Oh, here's a question. Major question. Lil Chillin' the True, not Lil Chillin' the Undead.
Mm-hmm.
Lil Chillin' the True bows to Albus. I thought that the Lil Chillin' the True was only going to bow, if I listened correctly, to people who had nothing but true, good, selfless intent in their heart and soul, right? Something like that.
I went back and forth with this, and I'm going to have to watch it again, the wording, because if that's the wording they're going by, that's Newt. Except that Newt is not someone that wants to be in a leadership position.
Well, look, I don't know who it is, but I know who it's not. It's not Albus Dumbledore. Albus Dumbledore wanted to conquer the Muggle world for the greater good as a child. Regardless of his reason for wanting to do so, he wanted to do so.
But that was not a current place of heart of where he was at.
Yeah, but throughout the films, throughout the books, throughout the films, everything, Dumbledore admits at many points that he is far from a perfect, he lies his way through the majority of his life. Yeah, but I don't know if it's not perfect. It's intent. Well, yeah, but it's splitting hairs, and we would really need to hear the wording again of how they explained it. Yeah, I love the way that Jude Law handles it. And he's like, oh no, not me. I thought that was very funny. Yeah. And it reminded me of that moment, in the Harry Potter books where they talk about how they were trying to get him to minister. And he's like, that's no. Yeah. Difference is in the books, you can't convey the humor and just him being I thought it was very funny the way that he was no. And then it bows to Santos or whatever. And she becomes leader. I didn't understand. He's like, surely there's another. And then the children's like, okay, I didn't fully get that, but it's fine. It really didn't matter. And that's the end of what I'm going to call the contemporaneous film before we get to the final scene. Anything else you want to add on about the contemporaneous film?
We have we really avoided like the Credence conversation.
Well, I think why do you think we avoided? I wanted to ask you that.
It wasn't a main through line. There was one scene that like I really not enjoyed. That's weird. How it was filmed was very interesting. Was the Dumbledore Credence fight scene, and I think it was really interesting to watch. And it like was another one of those like mental spells where it all kind of happened inside their brains. But then there's that Aberforth Credence scene at the end. That's very reflective.
Yeah, I just don't care about Credence, and I don't like nothing to. The storyline doesn't matter to me. It's a red herring. Yeah. It's not something that matters to the core of the story.
It is, and in this movie, they're like he's dying, and to me, that means it's a way for them to write him out of the story. I don't think he's going to appear again, especially with everything else going on with the actor.
Well, I want to talk about again here in a minute. I agree with you, but I want to talk about what again could even mean, because we get this final scene, which is inside/outside of Kowalski's bakery. We're back in New York. And inside you have Jacob preparing for his wedding to Queenie. You have Newt nervously rehearsing his best man speech, but really focusing on seeing Tina. Then you go outside and you have Eulalie Hicks and you have Callum Turner, Theseus showing up. And then Tina shows up, or vice versa in terms of order. Tina showing up for a solid 30 seconds of the film. But what I want to talk about is the scene with Dumbledore that Newt has.
Yes.
Because it raises a couple questions for me.
Yeah, I had one big question after watching it.
Okay, so let's see if we cover that one in the logical path I'm about to go down here. One of the things that Newt says to Dumbledore is, I didn't think I'd see you here. I didn't know if I was going to be here. I didn't know if I would, or however he phrased it back. Right, which started me thinking, when exactly is this scene taking place? Then Newt, with an extreme sense of like closure and finality, says, like, it was like an honor to help you. I would do it all again. Which then I'm like, really, when is this scene taking place? Is this a flash forward? Because I heard that scene, like, oh, well, Grindelwald's done. The Wizarding World is saved. Dumbledore doesn't need any more help with a big mission right now. Because if this scene takes place, let's say weeks after the scene in Bhutan, is Newt really saying, hey, we're done. This was fun. I would do it again sometime if you want. I don't understand where this takes place in the timeline.
I don't think it's like a flash forward type of thing. To me, it was, now that the blood pact is over, Dumbledore himself can move against Grindelwald.
Yeah, but Dumbledore... agreed.
Yes, Newt has helped with things, but he was never going to be the one to do the battle.
Was he? But the final actual battle, sure, but Dumbledore has proven time and time again that he's not a fan of just, hey, let's go battle.
Yeah.
It's machinations and games.
It's a long game, yeah.
Right. And so it felt odd to me that Newt was like, hey, we're done here. I'd do it again if you want, but we're done.
Yeah. My question up.
Okay, go ahead. This might be my final one. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
My question after that conversation was, it felt like that if they choose to do another movie, that it won't be Fantastic Beasts. It will be Dumbledore versus Grindelwald, and we might see some of these characters we enjoy, but there's not going to be a focus on them. That they are no longer the people we are following. We'll be following more along the lines of Dumbledore, Grindelwald.
Yeah, well, my question was in a slightly similar vein, albeit different. That final scene provided simultaneously finality if Warner Brothers wanted to wipe their hands of this franchise, or regardless of what direction they take it in, with that "I do it all again if you ask me to" line, the ability to open it up with another movie tomorrow.
They can end it with everyone feeling comfortable because everybody knows what happens with the battle.
Yeah.
We don't have to actually see it. We know how it ends.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. We had joked in the lead up to this movie that like if this movie performed really poorly, not only was there not going to be another, that one was pretty not necessarily joked about, pretty widely known that like that was like the sentiment around Warner Brothers, but also like, hey, there was going to be major redevelopments to the upcoming Epic universe.
Yeah.
Right. I have heard from a couple different places in the past couple of days as media have started to see this movie that expectations based on early reaction seem to be high enough that Warner Brothers is comfortable with moving ahead with this franchise as a movie franchise. To your point, what the next movie is, whether it's Fantastic or whatever, right?
Yeah.
This franchise is going to continue. A, B, there was some talk they were going to pivot it to a TV series. I don't think that's going to happen. And they could. They still could.
They could.
But I don't think it's going to happen at this point. But C, that it feels like if box office returns come in the way that early indications on this film seem like they will, Epic Universe is going to be Fantastic Beasts. The corner is going to be Fantastic Beast centric, and it's not. They're not going to have to redevelop that last minute. So, all in all, I think Warner Brothers is going to be pleased with the outcome of this film.
That's the movie.
No, what was your favorite scene?
My favorite scene. I don't know if they're like necessarily favorites. Like I like the one that you talked about with the emotional level of the Ariana scene. I also like the like book port key situation happening because I just enjoyed watching that with all the pages flying. But after first watching, I can't pick like a specific scene that I'm like, that was my favorite.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, no, I loved the Dumbledore Newt scene at the Hog's Head. I thought that was just, I don't need to go into it again. I thought it was beautiful. Who won the movie for you?
Who won the movie? I think Dumbledore did. I mean, I love Jacob. I love Newt. I loved the relationship of Dumbledore and Aberforth. And it just keeps coming back to like in the sets, I really liked Dumbledore throughout this one.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think Jacob is a really close second because again, Dan Fogler does God's work in this movie in terms of his range and his acting choices. But Jude Law, I think, demonstrates a lot more nuance in this film than he had opportunity to, mind you, in the first couple.
We see a lot more of like thought process.
And we also see a lot of pain.
Yes.
Right. I thought Jude Law was phenomenal. I'll tell you what surprised me most. Listeners, this is an odd one, but the credits, stay for the credits. There's no post-credit scene, at least not one that I saw. But the credits are beautiful. Mm-hmm. Like the graphic design they have going on as the credits are rolling, absolutely gorgeous. Like really, really gorgeous in a way that is hard to explain because it feels silly. Just stay for the credits and watch the credits because you won't feel like you've really wasted time.
The song choice felt a little out there during the credits.
Yeah, it did. I agree. Also, the movie's beautiful. We talked about this a lot during our Potter rewatch that like I hated the sepia tones that got put over the majority of like the back half of the Potter films, and Crimes of Grindelwald falls prey to a lot of color filters. This movie, and again, I think probably because it takes place in the snow, so it's kind of hard to put tons of filter over that. It looks beautiful. Like it's not a movie that is kind of monochromatic in any way, shape, or form. Like when there's color, it pops, and when there's not color, it's a beautiful kind of white gray slate that I think really, really works. So, yeah, and I think James Newton Howard is back to do the music on this one for the third one again. Good score. Like it didn't feel obtrusive or intrusive at any point, right? It fit well. Mm-hmm. This is a good movie.
It was. Runtime was 2 hours, 23 minutes. And I didn't have any moment where I'm like, we're still here. Like,
I didn't have that. I didn't have that. But again,
slow.
Again, those first 30 minutes or so when we're jumping from like vignette to vignette, I was like, oh no.
Yes, but that's different than like sitting there going, are we still going through this?
Well, right, but at that point, I was like, "Oh God, do I have to sit through 2 hours, 23 minutes?" And it picked up, it got better, whatever. But stay with it through those first couple scenes, y'all. I don't have my rankings in front of me, and I know you don't either. I think this.
No, I do. They've been. I've kept them on my computer for situations like this.
It's definitely going to take me a couple more watches to really give it a true ranking.
Yeah.
But again, it's top half. Remind me where I fell with
Deathly Hallows Part 1, Order, Deathly Hallows Part 2, Half-Blood Prince, Chamber, Fantastic Beast, Azkaban, Prisoner, Goblet, Crimes.
What were 4 and 5? Chamber and
Half-Blood Prince and then Chamber.
It's somewhere. I'm gonna have to watch it a couple more times. It's somewhere for me in that Prince Chamber region of like 3, 4, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah,
somewhere in there.
I'd put it around 4, 5.
I think it's better. Like I think it's better than Fantastic Beasts 1. It's certainly better than Fantastic Beasts 2.
Yes.
So for me, my floor is 6, right? Because 6 is where I have Fantastic Beasts 1.
Yes.
Right. So for me, it's not like I don't think it's better than Deathly Hallows Part 2. So I'm not putting it I'm not putting it third, and I'm not. It's better than Fantastic Beasts 1, so I'm not putting it sixth. So for me, it's somewhere in that 4 or 5 range. I'll have to go through that and figure it out.
Yeah, and mine's right around the same place.
Yeah, y'all, good film. Go see it.
Yeah, go see it. Enjoy.
Got to say, shout out to Warner Brothers for inviting us to go see the film. That was a lot of fun. It was really cool to see it with a bunch of our friends, right? Everyone. Mm-hmm. I mean, Johnny, Carla, Nicolette, Susan, Amanda, Brandy, Paula, Karina,
Meg.
Melissa, Meg, Diego.
Yeah.
So many people were there. I've never really experienced seeing a film, not necessarily with friends, even just with people all of a same fan. Like Batman probably was the closest I got. When we saw the Batman the other month at a fan premiere.
Yeah, I talked to Paula about this, and I referenced like you and me, is that when we saw Crimes, it was like us and 1 or 2 people we knew that weren't necessarily like big fans, but people that we were like, oh, please come see this with us. And this was the first time like where I felt like I sat in a theater and everyone around me was fans of the thing and just excited to be there to experience it together.
Yeah, the security guard, God bless her, she was before the movie started, she goes, y'all are like a bunch of kindergartners running up and down the aisles. You guys are excited and loud.
We were talking about, we're like, do you think they've ever had like a pre-screening where like the entire screening knew everyone?
Yeah, that's a good point. So anywho, again, shout out to Warner Brothers for the invite, but really shout out to y'all because we got invited because we do this podcast, and I don't know what the hell it is we do here every week, but apparently we're doing something right because we got Warner Brothers' attention in a good way. So thanks to y'all for listening and engaging with us every week on Instagram, on social media, at Creating Magic Podcast, creatingmagicpodcast@gmail.com, Creating Magic PC on Twitter. Otherwise, we'll see y'all next time. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Bye.
Idea to get us killed, or worse, expelled.